Want to know how Canada's top entrepreneurs think about creating significant wealth? Join me, Thane Stenner, founder of Stenner Wealth Partners at CG Wealth Management and host of the Smart Wealth Podcast. Download today at iHeartRadio or your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe now.
Hello, everybody. My name is Thane Stenner of Stenner Wealth Partners of CG Wealth Management, and I'm also the proud host of the Smart Wealth Podcast here on BNN Bloomberg. I have the privilege of interviewing many successful entrepreneurs, professionals, and thought leaders over the course of the year. I have another special guest here with us today, Mr. Scott Terrio. So welcome, Scott.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, so Scott is the head of the Consumer Insolvency Group of Hoyes Michaelis. I think I said that correct, Scott?
Michaelis, yeah.
Michaelis, okay. Good.
Interchangeable, I think, at this point.
Sounds good. Well, welcome once again. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule, because I know things are getting busier for you these days. So before I kind of jump in with a little bit of Scott's background and bio here, I wanted to set the table. So why am I interviewing Scott? Well, I'll tell you, because he's an insolvency expert. So some people would say, okay, why interview an insolvency expert, on this podcast? The reality is I find that professionals like Scott are kind of at the leading edge of how the economy is doing based upon households. And you'll hear more through the question and answer that we go through with Scott about this. But basically, insolvencies or the trends within reorganizations, as they accelerate, that kind of tells you about a little bit more of what's going on in the economy, and it's kind of boots on the ground information. So I'm really looking forward to this interview with Scott, and I think you will as well. So before we jump into our questions, I'll give you a little bit of bio on Scott, various designations, and he's been a regular author of Maclean's and Canadian Business magazines, and a listed columnist for Money Sense, focusing on consumer debt issues. He's a frequent media commentator, appearing on BNN Bloomberg TV, CBC, and various radio broadcasts. He's contributed to such publications as the Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, National Post, or Financial Post, and The Walrus, amongst others. So basically, he's been in the insolvency industry since 2010, I think. Right, Scott?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. So 14, 15 years now. And so I think, again, his insights are going to be quite insightful for us to learn from today. He's helped over 8,000 clients basically file for reorganization or insolvency. And he has a certain way to him that he helps people feel comfortable in kind of their overall process. He's based in Ontario, and his organization is, I think, the largest insolvency expert practice in the Ontario region. So again, I think there's going to be some really interesting comments that come up today. And he brings an interesting previous background in sales, marketing, and business development in helping make clients feel as comfortable as possible and guiding them through various options and tactics, and in trusting advice and solutions under pretty difficult circumstances for a lot of people when they arrive at Scott's Zoom meeting or in person. He's had various professional experiences, including formerly he was with John Deere, and prior to that, he was with the agricultural group in Ontario. So he has some interesting, varied backgrounds, and correct me if I'm wrong if I didn't get that exactly right, Scott, but again, welcome. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. But
thank you very much.
Let's get started on this one. So,
sure.
As far as leading in, personal filings for business versus personal, just maybe explain to the audience kind of where your specialty is a little bit more, and kind of what you're observing today.
Sure. So our firm does personal insolvency filings only. We don't do corporate. We are, I believe, we're the largest private, non-national consumer insolvency trustee in Canada. So we're all across Ontario. We see lots of files, and there's a big difference between a corporate filing and a personal filing. A lot of the personal filings we do are actually a result of corporate. So that you might have a small business that, failed, for whatever reason, and we end up doing a personal filing to take care of the personal debts, either that derive from the business, whether it be director liability debts or personally guaranteed corporate debts, whatever. But we don't do the actual corporate filing because in a lot of cases it's not necessary. So all consumers, all personal filings, and we see a lot of them. And so, 3,000-4,000 a year gives you a good taste of what's going on, as you alluded to earlier, kind of, the canary in a coal mine sort of effect. And yeah, it's, we notice trends because we actually study all of our filings every year. We have what's called a Joe Debtor study for all of our filings within a given calendar year. It comes out in February every year, and very in-depth analysis of who's filing, what's the profile look like, what are the trends that we're seeing in terms of filings, kinds of debts, whatever. And that gets a lot of attention usually just after we publish it, for just the reasons that you alluded to. Is just this stuff is interesting to some people. I was kind of surprised by that when I started in this industry, but I guess if you think about it, it makes sense. We have a good arena seat, I guess, for what's happening in Canadian households financially.
Yeah, well said. So where would you, again, staying 36,000 feet before we go more granular. So where do you sense we are right now in the economic cycle? Are we in a recession? Are we very close to one, as its classic definition? What's your sense?
Yeah, well, I'm not an economist, thank God, but I heard somebody, I can't claim credit for this, but I thought it was very smart. Somebody a few months ago said, Canada may not be in a recession, but Canadians are. And I think what was meant there was, from a household standpoint, a lot of people are hurting, right? And so, call it a recession, call it whatever you want, but there's certainly been a very negative impact on Canadian households financially in the last 3 or 4 years. And of course, we all know what's happened. Unless you've lived in a cave, we had a, once in a century pandemic. We've had generational inflation. We've had interest rates go up 10 times in 18 months, especially going up in a, let's say, an environment of free money. And so a lot of people who weren't used to having to pay for their money had to pay for their money on top of all those other things I mentioned. And so I think we're probably in a recession as far as, households go. Whether that meets the criteria for TIF or other economics, I don't know. But and from an insolvency cycle, like a sort of a credit cycle standpoint, the last time we had a major insolvency filing spike was 2009 to about 2011. And we haven't had one since then. Like, we've gone, better part of 14 years here without having any kind of real insolvency reckoning, which is sort of natural in, any industry or economy. And that's because rates were so low, and, most Canadians are homeowners, and houses prices were going up, equity was going up, and people didn't have to call us. And so it was almost all renters for a long time. And so we didn't see a spike for a long time. And my timing, although my career choice was good, my timing was terrible because I just happened to miss the last spike by about a year. So this is my first spike essentially after 14 years of working in this industry. So that's kind of where we're at on a credit cycle standpoint, I'd say.
So as far as, this spike, so, just maybe compare what you're seeing on filings today and in incoming inquiries versus a year or 2 years ago.
Yeah. So, well, we're seeing a lot more filings, and the data bear that out. I think we're at the leading edge of an insolvency spike here that's probably going to go for a while. I kind of liken this to the 90s recession, which, if you were smart like me and just came out of university right into the teeth of a recession, for more great timing on my part, just don't do what I do, okay? So I think we're at the leading edge of what's probably going to be a multi-year cycle here of insolvency filing, just because there's so much debt in the system this time. Right. Because we didn't have a mid-decade reckoning, right? There was no 2015 or 16 kind of, 5 or 6 year cycle peak. There wasn't one. And so we've got all that backload, and then we've got the factors I just mentioned, the sort of the macro factors thrown into that. So everything's more expensive, including housing and groceries and everything. People suffered through the pandemic. Small businesses got really hammered. There's more tax debt than ever right now. So there's all these factors that didn't exist in the '09 spike. And then, of course, there wasn't a mid-decade spike. So I think we're looking at a prolonged spike here because there's just the system's so backloaded. And because we're possibly entering into a time here where, people are spending less and retracting what they spend, and there's going to be job losses. I mean, so I don't know how bad that's going to be, but all of that just points to probably a multi-year run here.
So when you say multi-year run is like, what is the typical cycle, if there is one, compared to what you think this one may look like?
The last one, 2009, was pretty short, I got to say. It was like 2 years. That's it. And pretty much after about 2011, it kind of went back down to low levels again. It just stayed there for a long time. This, I think, will be 3, 4, 5 years of insolvency filings that are high, because we also have this rollout of mortgage renewals, right? And so, this 5-year cycle we have in this country of renewing your mortgage, and all these people who are going to be renewing the rest of this year, all of 25 and 26, which the numbers are pretty high for those, according to, mortgage experts. And when you're faced with your mortgage going up a lot, it causes a whole bunch of other problems in your budget, right? Because you got to pay that. And so something else has to give with your income not going up. And that's without any events in your household, like job loss, sickness, divorce, whatever. If everything else goes well, you're still going to have all these households that are going to have to spend more money. And even though rates are going down, if your last renewal was 2021 or so, you had very close to free money if you got a good mortgage rate. And even if rates come down a bunch, they probably go up 5 times from where you were at, or maybe 4 or 3. And so you're still faced with this impact that you can't fake. You got to pay your mortgage. So I think that's going to contribute too, because we're seeing homeowners now, which we didn't see for the better part of 10 years virtually. And a lot of homeowners calling us now in various, situations for homeowners, but certainly lots more homeowners now. That's going to be, I think, a feature of the next 2 or 3 years.
Right. So maybe share with us the demographics, like who are the most frequent call-ins these days for you, like demographically?
Well, so our study, which is 2023, but it holds this year still, except for the more homeowners, it's usually people in their 30s, 40s. I think 44 is our average age, because that's right in the sweet spot where you're making enough and you just still got quite a bit of debt because you haven't paid it all off yet in your life cycle and work cycle. And we're getting a real squeeze effect between generations, right? So you've got kids you're paying for stuff. You've probably got elderly parents that you're looking after. Like, there's a real sandwich effect going on. So that's contributing to the age demographic. We're seeing some disturbing age trends, like young people filing in their 20s and old people filing in their 60s, and so, there's all kinds of reasons for those things happening, but that's not something that's happened traditionally. If you're young enough, you didn't have enough credit to really be in a situation, or you were making decent money. Well, a lot of young people aren't making decent money, or they're working the gig economy and they've had to use credit to live because of the price of life. I'm glad I'm not in my 20s right now. I'm also glad I'm not in my 60s or 70s right now, because, those people are also suffering because, they've seen their life's nest egg get reduced by all kinds of factors. And the cost of elderly care is enormous. And so unless you have family that can help you, it's very hard. And so that's a bit of a sad demographic. We are still seeing overwhelmingly renters versus homeowners, even though there's more homeowners coming, but that will change. We keep what's called a bankruptcy homeowners index. It's basically just the percentage of homeowners who file in a given year, whether it's a proposal or a bankruptcy. And it's sat around 1% for like a long time. And it was as high as 30 back in 2011. It's now crept up to about 7. That's a significant jump from where we've been for a long time. It's probably going to double that or whatever, maybe even worse. So that's kind of the profile of who's filing. There's a lot more, as I said, tax debt. There's a lot more renters typically have about 50,000 in unsecured debt, and homeowners have about 70, 75. quite a bit more because they're more credit worthy with the home. So it's just like, here's more credit, but doesn't mean you can actually necessarily do anything with it. So that's kind of the profile of who files. And what we're seeing more recently, typically, and as I said, the big impact lately is the homeowners.
Stay with us, everybody. I'm with Scott Terrio. We're just going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Want to know how Canada's top entrepreneurs think about creating significant wealth? Join me, Thane Stenner, founder of Stenner Wealth Partners at CG Wealth Management and host of the Smart Wealth Podcast. Download today at iHeartRadio or your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe now.
Thanks, everybody, for staying with us. We're back here with Scott Terrio, and back into the interview we go. So any surprises in your data? Like, is this the bottom 50% of households? Is it like how far is it moving up kind of the overall profile in the Canadian economy?
I think I know what you're getting at there. It's the people who are calling us, I would say subjectively are much more normal than you think. Like good jobs, maybe they're homeowners, maybe not, but really like, a family household income of 150,000 should mean you're not in my office or my Zoom call. But they are, right? And so I think that's the surprising and disturbing part of this is how many people are having to resort to an insolvency proceeding who are actually making pretty decent money. And it's important to say here to that point that we see very few people who got into debt trouble on purpose, meaning like they just went and spent like crazy. That never happens. Okay. This is all very organic, and it usually is long in developing. Either that or there was one event or two events that happened, because this is also a very event-driven business, right? Like you can go from being in really good shape to being in really bad shape in a short time, right? If you have a couple of things happen to you. And so I think the biggest thing right now is people who 10 years ago I would have never thought would be filing are calling us because they just can't make their debt payments.
Mm. So maybe walk us through, just anecdotally, kind of what would be the top 5 in order reasons why people call you? Like what's triggered them? Number 1 right through number 3 or number 5 that kind of come to mind.
Well, I think the biggest thing for people calling us is they can't make their payments. This is a payment-driven country. Okay, I'm sure you know this. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't get $1 million mortgage on 150,000 income without it being all about payments. Right. That's like, same with cars, right? $70,000 car. That's why they tell you the weekly amount, not the monthly amount. I don't want you to say that it's $600-700 a month. That sounds like a lot. It's $150 a week or whatever. And so everything is about payments in this country when it comes to debt. It's a credit-driven society. And so as long as you can make payments, so what? Nobody calls us saying, my personal balance sheet is way out of whack. I have way more debt than I have assets. Nobody says. I've never had that call once. I've always had people call me saying, I'm starting to miss payments. I haven't slept in 6 months. My wife and I are fighting. That's what it's about. And people call us when they're stressed, and they also don't call us for a long time. We figure that between the time when you realize I'm in trouble, I can't fix here probably on my own, and the time they call us is a good 12, 24 months sometimes. Right. And of course, it never gets better in that time.
Right.
Time is the enemy of debt.
Yep. And
so if you are in deep right now, 24 months from now, or even 12, it's not going to be better. It's going to be worse. But that's human nature. It's defense mechanisms. It's, not dealing with something that is going to be ugly.
Yeah. I call that the slope of hope.
Yeah.
No, honestly, because people kind of...
I've not heard that one before, but yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because I think people think it's going to somehow get better, but the math isn't adding up.
Yeah, I've heard. I mean, there's the extend and pretend. There's delay and pray. Depending on your jurisdiction. So that's typically the main reason that people phone us, no matter what their other circumstances are, is because they can't make their payments. Okay. Because that's when creditors start calling you. That's when CRA is on your back. That's when the phone calls and the texts and the emails just are all day constant. you're not sleeping, you're not making good judgment about your work or your personal life.
Yeah.
So in a very broad sense, that's what we see the most. In a payment-driven country, we get payment-driven calls.
Yep. So just going back to that question again, like how would you maybe organize the priorities people make over what they pay first?
Great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works, right? From the time you realize you're in trouble till you call me, that's what you do in the middle is, as you said, you prioritize, okay, well, what can I pay? I only have this much every month. And so typically the very last thing they will not pay is their mortgage, of course. We're Canadians. We'll kill our grandmother before we miss a mortgage payment. And so then you go down the scale on secured debts. So your house, your mortgage number one, your car probably next, because you don't want to lose the asset that's tied to the payment.
Yep.
Then you go down to credit cards and lines of credit, and oftentimes people are juggling those to the extent that they're not only using one to pay the other, but sometimes they're staggering them. So if you have 6 credit cards, let's say, you pay 3 this month and 3 the next.
Gotcha.
Not the same 3. Okay, because nobody's gonna sue you in court if you only miss 1 month's payment, and people kind of figure that out, or else they look it up.
Gotcha.
That's in desperation. So then you move up the scale, and okay, then maybe it's car payment, because I don't sleep in my car. My kids don't live in my car. And then it's mortgage last, of course.
Sure.
So and there's even I've had calls even this year from amateur investors, I'll call them, right? So like the teacher who bought a condo as an investment property, right?
Yep.
Both mortgages went up, and the condo fees on the rental went up, and the renter stopped paying for a while. Even that's extreme. You don't even need that to happen, though. Like the accumulation of those things, and the fact that you now know mentally that I'm not only upside down equity, maybe because a lot of condo equity got wiped out in the last 2 years because people who bought late with high LTV are underwater. So you got that on your mind. Mm-hmm. The investment property I bought, the guy at the seminar didn't tell me it was supposed to go down. And I'm also having to cover all kinds of costs every month because the rent isn't paying all the costs of this thing. So that gets on people's minds. So we've had a lot of those calls. And we've had calls from back of keeping this related to housing at this point, pre-condo buyers, right? So, bought the condo is on a 4-year build cycle, and, it's not getting completed, or else I can't close. Condo's getting completed, but I can't close because now the rates are this and my income dropped or whatever. Yep. So your down payment's gone, and the building developer might be suing you also.
Or going broke.
Yeah. So these things are happening, right? And this is all stuff that 12, 18 months ago, I wouldn't have been talking to you about. And it's just starting, right? Like really, because homeowners also have a longer ramp before they call us. So the housing issues that we're seeing now, again, this is back to my projected, this is going to be a multi-year cycle thing, because it's going to take time for mortgages to renew and impacts to happen, but also for people who, bought a pre-built condo in 2022. Okay, well, just now it's starting to look like that's not going to happen.
Right.
And so it's going to roll out gradually. Kind of like the 90s housing slide. It didn't happen. It wasn't a crash. It was just a slow drag, And I think the insolvency cycle here will be like a slow. Right? It's not going to be anything dramatic. We're not going to be up 40% in 1 month or something, but it'll just be 10, 15 over the course of 2 or 3 years, which is a lot. Because you have to remember, for every Canadian that files an insolvency proceeding, there's 10 or 20 that don't. And there's a lot of them who are in trouble who were pretty close to maybe having to file. So they're going to have to do something, right? Because as you said before, there's nothing organic that's going to help me here, right? Yeah. I got to do something, right? Like something has to change. And if I'm not filing an insolvency proceeding, I've got to do something. I've either got to borrow my way out of this, borrow further my way out of this, or something, right? Or sell my home, which nobody does.
Yep. So maybe explain a little bit more. I read an article the other day about how Canada's got 6 times more CRA staffers than the U.S. per capita, which I astounded to actually see that 6 times more.
Yeah.
So how aggressive is CRA being these days? Like, is that causing some
It
indigestion
is. It's a
issues?
good question. Yeah, because I think people who don't do what I do don't see necessarily what CRA is like. We have a front row seat for what CRA is like because there's tax filings or tax elements in a huge portion of our filings. And there's more tax debt this now than there ever has been since I've been doing this. And that's proven out statistically. So what happened, to give you the background, is CRA spent the better part of 2 or 3 years as Santa Claus, didn't they? They were giving out COVID benefits and CERB and SEBA and everything you can think of because the government used them, I think, wisely as their arm because CRA knows where everybody is, right? So if you need to get money out fast, use that. Okay, cool. Then they turned the tap off about 18 months ago. We saw it immediately, right? Because people, again, they call us because they're stressed. Well, CRA calling you stresses people out, I can assure you. Yeah. Especially if you've never had an interaction with CRA in your life. Well, millions of Canadians met CRA after COVID, right? Like if people who'd never talked to a CRA agent in their life, all of a sudden we're talking to them. Because the initial round, number one, is the initial round of COVID benefits was paid in gross dollars because they just wanted the $2,000 a month out the door, right?
Yep.
And take any tax off. Well, that ended up being $4,000 owing.
Yep.
2 years later, right? So all of a sudden you maybe have 30,000 in credit card debt. Okay, that's bad, but maybe not insurmountable. And then you add another 4,000 in credit card debt on top, or CRA debt on top of that. And CRA has been extremely aggressive in the last 12 months. And when CRA decides to be aggressive, it's bad because they can do a lot of things to you that banks can't, right? And they don't have to go to court like banks do in order to garnish your wages or freeze your bank account or put a lien on your house or whatever, because they use tax court. Yep. It's effectively in-house. So it just happens. There's no 90 days of, filing a statement of claim in court and getting a judgment hearing and an execution, none of that. And it happens like overnight. So, if you're a small business owner, you wake up one day and you can't function because CRA has shut your bank account down for your business because you didn't pay HST or whatever.
Yep. Or
an individual, you get your wages garnished and there's no maximum, by the way, on CRA's garnishments. There's no 20% rule. Now they don't often take 50 or 100, but they take 30 and, try living on that, right? Make 5,000 a month, and all of a sudden you're making 3,800 or 4,000 or whatever a month. And so that gets people into our office in a hurry, and that's been happening a lot because CRA is really trying to collect back on all that stuff that they gave out and the rest. I think they just I think CRA takes certain echelons of a profile type and says we're going after this group right now, and then we're going after this group right now.
Yep.
It's hard to pick a pattern with them because they're kind of a bit random, but they're certainly worse than I've ever seen them for sure.
Yeah, and big picture too, Scott. I mean, CRA's trying to maximize the collection of taxes because of our deficits as a country, right? So it's
Yep.
So walk our listeners and viewers through a process. Ring, Scott. I'm phoning you up. What's kind of the process you try to take that inquiry through?
Yeah, well, I've done 4 of them today already. So, somebody phones, I get on the phone with them, tell me the situation. Just start anywhere you like, doesn't matter. And so they tell us, they tell us a lot. It's really quite something. I think once they call, they're ready to go. Once they've made the call, it's like therapy.
They're motivated.
But it's also, they've been tight as a drum for a long time, right? And it's like, okay, I'm just going to spill. I don't have to do a lot of prodding. I know how to do that, but I don't usually have to. And they just tell us their entire situation from whatever angle they want. Eventually we get around to everything. So I want to know your assets, your liabilities, your job, your family, are you a homeowner or not? I want to know everything. And I mean everything, because if there's anything left out, it's usually bad. Not intentionally. But sometimes people don't think that, oh yeah, by the way, I have an RESP for my kids worth $40,000. I need to know that. So whatever's not told, we ask, right?
Yep.
So we get the picture, and within half an hour, certainly an hour, I can tell people what they can do. You just get good at this, right? Over time.
Yep.
Now there's some refinements and some tweaking. But at that point, we say, here's a list of documents I need you to get me, and a form to fill in, and or we can do that on the call if you want. That's fine, and it takes a week or two at the most, depending on the complexity. Self-employment is usually trickier because you got to figure out, okay, what's the real income here? That's multiple businesses is tricky. But again, we're doing personal filings, so they can keep their business going if they're going to do a filing. There's ways to do that. I don't need to get into that here, but that's how it works. It's once you've called, we can get this underway pretty quick. Like it's within a couple of weeks, and it doesn't matter whether you haven't paid your debts in a long time or some people are perfectly current. Like a lot of people are right up to date on their payments, and I'm amazed at how like somebody reads off their list of debts to me, and I'm like, "Are you current on all of these?" Yep. Like, wow, $1,200 a month in minimum payments, like more. And like you get used to it. The human mind can get used to anything, right? And so they've been doing this for a long time. So you can imagine the stress, right? That's why this is such a release.
Yeah.
We're probably the first person they've spoken to financially in years, if not their life, that's actually saying, okay, we can fix something for you in short order, right?
Well, yeah. And you and I, on the prep call before we did this a few weeks ago, I asked you, I said, must be, I guessed wrong, but I said, this must be a really challenging job for you to it's around challenging news, negative news. And you said just the opposite. You said, well, actually, no, we're probably one of the first people they've talked to in a long time that can actually help them solve some issues.
Yeah.
It's kind of a good news call.
It's the opposite. People think it's like a family lawyer, like you must be depressed at night, and it's exactly the opposite, right? Because really, like by the end of the first phone call, they're thanking us and like, within reason, right? Like, it's not like it's not the greatest thing they've ever done. It's probably the worst thing they've ever done, but it's right now it's great. And it's exactly what they need right now and have probably needed for a long time.
Yep.
So yeah, it's very rewarding. It's because we also see the end, right? Like the proposal or the bankruptcy, whatever gets filed, and we set them up for a better future. It isn't just like file it and go away. This is financial rehab.
Yeah.
If you do it right.
Yeah. So walk us through that solution side of things. So people, you give them some ideas. You've done an inventory of where they're at. You're talking to them in a friendly enough way. It's not judgmental, right? Because it's in the business that you're in. Yeah. And I can see why actually some people would become more relieved. But what maybe just explain some of the solutions. Like what are you? Give us a quick case scenario.
I will for sure. Yeah. So typical person calls us. They have $55,000 in unsecured debt. So credit cards, lines of credit, maybe payday loans, maybe student loans, maybe taxes, all combined. That's what we deal with. We don't deal with secured because there's an asset involved with the secured. The only time we would deal with secured is if you were giving back an asset and there was a shortfall. So you gave back a car or the car got taken and there's a repo. There's a shortfall that's unsecured that goes in. So we say to them, okay, well, your options with us are personal bankruptcy or a consumer proposal. That's all we do. The provisions in the Bankruptcy Act, the Canadian Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act for consumers are two: personal bankruptcy, consumer proposal. Proposal is just a legal settlement that you make with your unsecured creditors through the courts. So you don't want to do bankruptcy for the 50 reasons it's not good to do bankruptcy. You make a 5-year arrangement through us in a consumer proposal where we take all your creditors combined, that 55 grand, let's say 100, because I don't want to do math. It isn't easy here. Okay. 100 grand. And you need 51% of the dollars owed to say yes to the proposal that you offer. So say you offer $400 a month for 60 months, 24,000 on the 100 grand, or let's say 30,500 a month. Then we wait to see what they say. Creditors get to vote. And so they vote. Every dollar is a vote. So you need 51,000 to say yes. The other 49 doesn't matter, by the way. This is like an election, right? So you get what you get, and they're all in anyway. So the ones that vote no don't get to opt out. This is a global solution because it's meant to be, again, a rehab.
Yep.
You're protected through the courts via a stay of proceedings. So nobody can call you, talk to you, go after you. The creditors' rights are restricted.
So it kind of puts that stuff on hold.
Yeah, legally, right? So all the stress and all the calls, that's all done. right? And so you get to breathe and you have a manageable amount of money. Now, the reason creditors will do this, by the way, and take this big haircut voluntarily is because if you file a bankruptcy instead, they're going to get less. Because we always offer more in a proposal than they would have gotten in a hypothetical bankruptcy filing, because bankruptcy has rules in this country, and a lot of them are around income. And you're very restricted in bankruptcy in Canada as to how much monthly income you can make before bankruptcy gets quite expensive in a hurry. Like if you're making good money every month, you don't want to do bankruptcy because you might end up paying 30 grand to do bankruptcy. Well, okay, why wouldn't you pay 40 to have a proposal filed instead where the credit rating's better, it's more flexible, it's open terms, you can pay it sooner, all that stuff. This is why 8 or 9 files out of 10 that we do are proposals, because it's a legal settlement that avoids bankruptcy. So that's typically what we say. Now, if the circumstances that they just spent 20 minutes or a half hour describing to me don't allow for either of those things, in other words, you have a house with 400,000 in equity, right? And you only have 50,000 credit card debt, you're not doing anything with me, okay? Because the creditors aren't, if you do a proposal, the creditors are going to say, sell your house, dude, and pay us now, right? I'm not waiting 5 years. You have a house, sell it. Well, nobody sells their house, okay? But that's what creditors think, and I see why. And so you're not doing bankruptcy because then the house is mine legally because we're a trustee. So it vests in us, and we have to sell it, kick you out, pay the creditors. Nobody does that. And so, and if you're a renter, well, that's not an issue. You don't own a house. I may have other assets that come into play, but we always calculate a hypothetical bankruptcy filing first based on your exact circumstances. So I can say, if you did bankruptcy, this is how much it would cost you. Here's how long it would be. Here's the credit implications. Good. And there are other implications to filing bankruptcy that you have to consider too. Like if you have a corporation, you can't be the director while you're not discharged and all these other things. So we walk people through everything possible. Like part of our job is to worst case as well. Right. So you're going to know everything you can possibly know about all of this stuff by the time we're done talking. 99% of the time. It might take a second meeting. That's fine. Yeah. I'll meet with people 10 times if they need to. It doesn't cost them anything. It's the same. But that's how it works from a, you calling me process standpoint.
Yep. So as far as you just said something there, it doesn't cost them anything. So how do you get paid for this?
Yeah. The consults we don't charge for the consults, is what I meant. The way trustees get paid is all set by law. So in a proposal, a trustee gets a percentage of the proposal, no matter what trustee, no matter what circumstance, period. It's a set amount. And the taxes, the proposal fees come out of the proposal itself. So if you file your proposal for $500 a month, the one I described for 16 months, 30 grand, that's it. There's no front fees. There's no back fees. There's no extras. I can't charge you like a lawyer. Good. So everything's contained within that. And that also, I think, is appealing to people who have been running for a long time. Right? Every month they skip a payment. Here's a payment. They're always thinking about payments and getting people off their backs, right? Yep. For a year. And it's brutal. And when you tell them it's one payment, this is what it's going to be, and it covers everything, like to them, to someone who's been in that situation for that long, that's like heaven, okay? Because they also have full protection, right? So it's just me they're dealing with. I deal with the creditors, and all you have to do is provide some information and make some payments. That's it.
But how long does this process take, either bankruptcy or proposal?
So the length of the proceeding, you mean, or the time you call me to we're filing?
Yeah, from the time you call to you filed and you're kind of starting a new payment program, or
a couple of weeks. Could be longer. Like I've had cases where it's been 2 years, but that's because the person needed to either go away and think about it or have their business fail or whatever. That's rare, right? But typically week or two. Oftentimes it's just a matter of getting some things lined up. Right? Like you have to either change your business if you're self-employed to something else, or you have to, maybe someone's just about to go on payroll. So like a tradesperson, let's say, who's been like working for themselves for 10 years. And now I just want to go work for a builder, get on payroll, make my life easy. Okay. Well, you do that. Call me next month, or, meantime, send me all the stuff. I'll get the file started or whatever. So it's a matter of administration, really. There's a few things we get people to do, but it's very quick. And this is also appealing to somebody who's kind of at the end of the rope, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to wait 6 months. I just want this done because I've phoned you and I've decided, right?
Yep. Yeah. Okay, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Scott Terrio.
Want to know how Canada's top entrepreneurs think about creating significant wealth? Join me, Thane Stenner, founder of Stenner Wealth Partners at CG Wealth Management and host of the Smart Wealth Podcast. Download today at iHeartRadio or your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe now.
Thanks for staying with us, everybody. We're back here with Scott Terrio, our special guest. Now back into the interview. So as far as like the net benefit to somebody going through insolvency versus bankruptcy, so maybe just walk through a scenario. Like, are we talking solvency, kind of settling with creditors for a range of 30 to 50 cents on the dollar kind of thing, or like maybe just, I'm not going to hold you to an exact number.
No, I think I got
range.
you.
Yeah.
So in a proposal, which is the settlement, right, versus the bankruptcy, you get an R7 rating on your credit report, and you get that rating for 6 years maximum. So if the proposal takes you 5 years, it's 1 year after on their record.
Got it.
If it takes you 4 years, it's 2 years after. But it can only be on 3 years maximum after. So if you can finish it in 1 or 2 years, you can shorten the 6 to 5 or 4.
On your
1 plus 3, 1 plus 3, 2 plus 3. Yeah.
On your credit rating. Gotcha.
Right. And then it's gone. So after 6 years, it's gone. Okay. But also gone is your debt. So you came in with $100,000 in my scenario, you paid 30. Okay, maybe we settled at 40. We offered 30 and you ended up paying 40,000 because the creditors asked you for more money. Fine.
Yep.
But you saved 60 grand plus interest. That's a ton.
Yep.
And more importantly is all that time of opportunity cost is now fixed. And you're a wealth management guy, like opportunity cost, right? Like, you're not spending 10 years of your life just paying minimum payments and just wasting your time. Right?
Digging out.
If you're in your 30s, like I tell people who are young, like, don't worry so much about this right now. You've got 50 years left in the marketplace, or 40, 6 of which is going to be this, right? So 10 years from now, because what you can't do during the time when you're not filing something with me is you can't save a down payment. How are you doing that? Paying $1,200 a month in minimum credit card payments? You're not. You're not doing anything, actually. You're not contributing to your kids' RESPs. You're not doing anything of that stuff, right? So I try and, frame this for people as back up a bit, and look at this. This is a blip, okay? It's bad, yes. Did you ever want to do this? No. Did you ever see yourself doing this? No. But this is where you're at, okay? And you have to understand that there's no other way out of this unless you can sell something or get some money from somebody, right? And so that's how we try and get people to look at this, right? Is that, okay, this may not be time for you to do this, but if you've been doing all this up till now and it's not working, it's not going to be working unless you start making twice as much money or something, okay?
Yep.
So that's, I guess, number one. Bankruptcy is an R9 credit rating for 6 years after your discharge, and your discharge could be 9 months or 21 months, depending on your income. But more importantly, with bankruptcy is that for the rest of your life, you will certainly, in a credit obsessed country, which we now are, you will certainly be asked the question probably multiple times in the rest of your life, have you ever filed bankruptcy?
Yep.
What do you say to that after the 7 years? You got to say yes legally, because if you don't, it's fraud. And if they can still look you up, by the way. So if it's gone off your credit report, Equifax, TransUnion,
yep,
I can still do a public search on the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy in about 5 minutes. I mean, you have to pay an amount or something. But if I'm an employer or a creditor or a landlord or a mortgage agent or a car lender,
sure,
and you're sitting across from me and you say, I didn't do bankruptcy. Well, that night, the 10 people I met with, I'm probably doing a routine check.
Right.
Maybe not. Okay, but maybe. So you don't want to have that for the rest of your life, having to either lie to that question or have to say yes to it. Okay, there's 10 people lined up for the apartment thing. So guess what? Now there's 9.
Yeah.
Because you got the bankruptcy. See ya.
Yep.
So the issue is the longer term, right?
Yep.
And so unfortunately we live in a credit obsessed society now. And so that's one of the things you got to think about. So we try and get people to think about every possibility before they do anything else. because it's a lot easier to make sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted before we sign than it is after.
Gotcha. So getting down, this has been fascinating so far, listening to kind of different things and stages that you walk through. So co-signed debt, right? Either bank mom and dad helping or others co-signing, just kind of maybe just walk us through the issues around that currently that you're seeing.
Yeah, great question, because this is a big one in our country, right? I mean, the last 10 years, when the housing boom, everybody had mom or dad co-sign their mortgage or their car loan or whatever, student loans, professional student lines of credit that banks lend. I've seen lots of that stuff, even credit cards and lines of credit. So the legal concept of joint and several, which is getting into the weeds a bit, but this is important, is that if you co-sign a debt with me, we are both 100% liable for that debt. That doesn't mean 50-50. It doesn't mean 70-30. It doesn't. But if I file an insolvency proceeding, a bankruptcy or a proposal, I'm legally off that debt by virtue of the bankruptcy of the proposal, but you're not. And that's where joint and several comes in. So draw a circle, draw a line through it, put Thane on one side and Scott on the other. Scott files a proposal, Thane's on the hook. Okay, for the whole thing. Now, yes, there's dividends coming from the proposal or the bankruptcy payments or whatever, but unless somebody is paying the minimums on that existing line of credit that you co-signed, that lender's coming after you. They can't come after me. Right. And this happens in defaults too. This is not just an insolvency proceeding. Like if you have a co-signed mortgage and you stop paying, mom's on the hook. Okay, mom's on the hook for the whole thing. And I can't tell you how many people I talk to who view co-signing as like a gateway only. Like it was just to get the mortgage. So the bank gave me the mortgage because mom signed it. No, the reason the bank did that is so that they could go after mom in case you don't pay. Yep. So, and that's a financial literacy thing in this country, but it's real, I can tell you.
Yep.
Because you can be, you can be a professional, whatever, and not know that basic element of finance, that joint and several concept. So co-signing is very dangerous if you don't have the wherewithal to pay the entire thing yourself when the person who asked you to co-sign defaults or does an insolvency proceeding.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think you're right. I think a lot of people view it as a bridge, but not necessarily
an approval.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So as far as household debt now, as a percentage of disposable income, what are you seeing currently in the marketplace?
Well, it's gone up because you look at any measure of credit these days, and it's either up or at record levels. Like credit card debt has exceeded 100 billion now in this country, and just as a year ago this month. Yep, and it's gotten worse since. Again, yes. So more people's monthly money, and that's what matters. Back to payments, payment-driven country. Like we live by month to month in this world, not just this country. Canada didn't invent this. But if you've got 6,000 coming in every month, let's say, and you're now spending 4 or 5 of that on your shelter, which is very common from what we see. Good. And if you combine shelter and vehicle, it's starting to get very bad because, and then you combine all that interest, right? And so I saw a chart a couple of weeks ago. I think I alluded this to when we discussed this before. The percentage of household debt that is devoted to interest is extremely high right now, and interest rates went up 10 times. Okay, we get that. Now they come down 3, and they're going to go down more, but there's that lag time, right? Sure. In between when these things happen. And people have started to pay what I call real interest in the last few years versus fake interest for the whole bunch of years. Like money was almost free for a long time there. And so all that money is going towards just the cost of your debt as opposed to the principal, which we all know is unhealthy and just prolongs things for people. And again, it's back to opportunity waste, right? If you pay a bunch of debts off for 10 years and a whole bunch of it went to interest, what did you do there?
Sure.
And so, and people are recognizing that, I don't think that was a thing in the collective unconsciousness in the 2010s, because money was so free and everything was kind of going up, stock market, house prices, whatever. And then when things start to slide, I think people really start to recalculate what's going on.
Gotcha.
And that's what's hurting a lot of them, right? It's not just inflation. It's, spending more money just to service debt.
Yep.
And the level of debt has to be serviced now is so high. And getting back to the thing about the houses and the cars, a lot of very expensive cars are out there, and the average length of a car loan now is 8 years average. For anybody our vintage,
Wow.
that's amazing. Average, right? But that's a younger generation. That's what's in their head, right? And again, we're back to the payments. Nobody mentions monthly. I don't want to tell you you're paying $900 a month. I'd rather tell you you're paying $250 4 times or something.
Yep.
$249. Sorry. And so,
yes.
No one ever tells me when I say, how much is your car payment? I don't say how much is your monthly car payment, because I want them to tell me the weekly or the biweekly.
Gotcha.
Because then I want to tell them not to be, sassy, just to say, you realize it's $900 a month. Okay. Yeah. And then plus insurance and gas. And sometimes their insurance is bruised, right?
Yep.
So you can be paying 70% of your net monthly income for your shelter and your car easily in this country every month. I see it all the time. And I think that people are starting to grasp that.
So clearly kind of your service and what your company does is of significant benefit to consumers or households. I can see that easily. So who are the net losers in all this? I think it's
a good question.
In some ways, it's obvious in some ways, but what would you say?
Really good question, because it's hard to answer that. I mean, the banks aren't going anywhere. No banks go under because insolvency filings are up. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen even in the States so much, where there's 100 banks, not 5 or 1,000 banks.
Yep.
And it's not the consumer necessarily, because they've just fixed their problem. Okay, it's bad for a few years, but ultimately it's good. I think it's probably the loser would be, to a certain extent, the economy itself. Because these people can't do much, right? Like, you're just buying food and paying for shelter and paying your proposal payment or your bank sheet. Like there's still a good decade there where all these people either filing insolvencies are the ones, especially who probably could have but didn't. That might be the biggest losers. And this is not a sales pitch, but again, we're back to, okay, it's going to take you 10 years now or 15 to pay those credit card debts off. And what are you going to do in that time? Right? You're not going on vacation. You're not putting your kids in hockey. You're not buying a car. You're not like all of those economic effects from gross restriction, right? You can't do anything, and your family can't do anything for 10 years. I think that may be where we point to the loser, is just, we've let this debt as a country get out of control.
Right.
By making money free for too long, frankly, and by eliminating risk from the marketplace, right? Like every time there's even a remote threat of a recession, we just cut rates, do some QE, get on that.
Yep.
Central banks, I think, are greatly to blame for the situation we're in. Let stuff fail, guys. It's okay. That's kind of how things work. That's natural reckoning. Yeah. And I don't say that so that I don't want to be any busier than I am. Okay. I've got lots to do right now. I don't need to be any busier, but I think the loser may be the fact that we are now going to enter a long period here where the economy might just suck. It doesn't have to be a recession or a depression or anything technical. It's just going to suck for a long time. And that's a shame, because I don't think we needed to do that.
So stagnation or stagflation.
Yeah. Like Frances Donald 4 years ago told me there's going to be stagflation. 4 years ago, she said that. I'm like, wow, I knew you were smart, but that's a great call. And that's exactly what's happening, right? We have now made a macro situation where probably not a lot's going to happen for a long time. Okay. Yeah. It's not going to be catastrophic, but it's not going to be great. Right. And, I look at my kids, what are they going to do? Right. What have we done the next generation and the next, right? Like a house is $1 million now, man. I'm getting us on my stool here a bit, but that's, you ask for the losers. Well, how about the next 2 generations?
Yeah, well said. Any final tidbit you want to leave our listeners or viewers with?
Well, I think if you know somebody that's struggling, they don't want to talk about it, okay? But they would like someone to nudge them. We see that a lot. And again, time is the enemy. So if you know somebody's struggling now, 5 years from now, they're not going to be better unless they do something, or unless something magically happens, right?
Sure.
And so get them to talk to you, okay? Like, they don't have to file insolvency, but if you're a trusted person with them, whether financial or otherwise, because the sooner they talk to somebody, the better it is across the board.
Gotcha.
Right? This stuff just gets worse and worse. And I see people every day, including the 3 or 4 I've talked to today, who should have called us a year ago, but they don't. Right. And sometimes it just takes somebody to say, you know what, you can't keep doing this, dude. Okay. Right. That's some hard advice as a friend or family member you can give somebody that they will thank you for later.
Yeah. Well, and as a professional, it's kind of you're more independent to be able to say that too, right? Versus it's not necessarily easy for a family member to be able to say that, or a friend.
Yeah,
right?
If somebody says that to you, you know they care enough about you to have that awkward, but they don't want to say that, right?
Correct.
Nobody wants to tell anybody their kids are ugly or they're in bad financial shape, but sometimes that's the best thing you can do for somebody, I think.
Well said. Well, listen, Scott, this has been a really good session. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule, and really appreciate your insights. And I'm sure our viewers and listeners will as well. Thank you once again for your time. We'll wrap up here.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks, Scott. Talk soon. That was Scott Terrio, Head of Consumer Insolvencies of Hoyes Michaelos. We hope you're enjoying the Smart Wealth podcast as much as I am hosting it. Stay tuned for more authentic personal conversations with amazing professionals who've already accomplished much and still have lots more to do. Again, I'm Thane Stenner of CG Wealth Management and Stenner Wealth Partners. Thanks for listening to the BNN Bloomberg Smart Wealth Podcast today.
The comments and opinions expressed in this podcast are the results of work done by Stenner Wealth Partners. They may differ from the opinion of Canaccord Genuity Corp. and should not be considered as representative of Canaccord's beliefs, opinions, or recommendations. All views expressed in this podcast are provided for informational purposes only and do not constitute an offer or solicitation to buy or sell any securities. The statements expressed herein are not intended to provide tax, legal, or financial advice, and under no circumstances should be construed as a solicitation to act as a securities broker or dealer in any jurisdiction. All views are intended for general circulation only and do not have any regard to the specific investment objectives, financial situation, or general needs of any particular person, organization, or institution. Canaccord is a member of the CIPF. The comments expressed in this podcast are the results of work done by Stenner Wealth Partners. They may differ from the opinion of Canaccord Genuity Corp. and should not be considered as representative of Canaccord's beliefs, opinions, or recommendations. All views expressed in this podcast are provided for informational purposes only and do not constitute an offer or solicitation to buy or sell any securities. The statements expressed herein are not intended to provide tax, legal, or financial advice, and under no circumstances should be construed as a solicitation to act as a securities broker or dealer in any jurisdiction. All views are intended for general circulation only and do not have any regard to the specific investment objectives, financial situation, or general needs of any particular person, organization, or institution. Canaccord is a member of the CIPF.